I'm almost like, is this controlling? The hammer has fallen. People have made voluntary decisions around taking away certain aspects that we didn't necessarily need to do at the time. And so either now we are coming up with new language and we're trying to scramble and try to keep those tenets in place so we can continue those traditions, or they're just going away, like the buildings, like the signs, like the statues, like those things are disappearing. How did this happen? Powers that be? I think it's just been in the process for a long time. Let me also say I'm coming from a perspective of a Black queer person, right? In academia, in education, in social work. So I am speaking from the experience of not only seeing that it happened, but it happening to me. There are just some conversations that I'm hearing that aren't long lasting. They are just not conversations that instill a level of implementation around those beliefs for them to last for a lifetime. If the things that we're talking about aren't instilled in the next generation after us, is it real? These walls have fallen a little bit too soon.
Hello, Dr. Shanae Thomas. Thank you so much for being here with us for Chung Huong Institute podcast. Shanéa, I have been super inspired by not only your TED Talk, but also I see you doing a lot of research with diversity, equity, inclusion, education. And I'm so fascinated with your curriculum development achievements and what that even means. I didn't even know you can actually get an achievement and certificate in that. And let me be clear for who's listening, not a certificate of achievement, but a certificate of like, well, this is amazing and everyone has to learn this method.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm always surprised at like where my work goes and who gets touched by it. So this is a treat. I can't wait to tell you all the things and answer the questions. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, let's get started. What do you want to know?
Thank you, Shanae. For people who don't know you, can you tell them a little bit about who you are and why this is very important for them to listen to?
Sure. I am Dr. Shanae Thomas. Shanae in this space is just fine. Pronouns that I use are he or she. I don't use they. I am originally from Hampton, Virginia. I am currently in Temple Hills, Maryland, which is down the street. It's 5 minutes from DC, about 15 minutes from Alexandria, Virginia. So I am in the middle of all the action right now. So I'm very close. I came to DC because I wanted to be a social worker. I wanted to find a way to inspire, particularly Black and Brown folks around their just what does liberation, what does freedom look like for them, and kind of all the aspects of how we are living these days. And I got here 20 years ago. So a lot of the work that I was doing there was around LGBTQ work. I think that kind of came at an intersection where I was not only working with students who were coming out in various ways, and also working with staff who didn't know how to support those students who were coming out, but I was coming out as well. I actually identify as a Black non-binary person. And so as kind of life went along, as my work grew, particularly in schools, I worked with high schoolers, middle schoolers, and then I eventually went to Whitman Walker Health, which is in DC, which is a health care organization that works with people who are living with HIV and AIDS and LGBTQ youth. So I worked with them for 5 years, helped them build some of their educational practices there, especially around therapy. I worked at University of Southern California for 10 years, working with them around curriculum development, moving eventually to University of Maryland, where I helped build their training program with mental health professionals working with LGBTQ folks. And then I finally landed, I just left the Council for Social Work Education, where I was the executive director of accreditation for 962 social work schools. So I was the person signing the paperwork, making sure the schools were at the standards that they needed to be. But I will say overall, like I've also just really been led to this work by being the person, and I know this is like, a cliche, but like I wanted to be the person I didn't get when I was younger. I wanted to be anytime that I tried to look for queer leadership or queer mentorship, I couldn't find it. I didn't know where the curriculum was. I didn't know that when I looked at some curriculum, they didn't include me. So I always wanted to make sure that I left a mark mark behind me, that I wanted to leave some source of legacy. And I think that has led me to where I am today as a writer. Next year, I have my book coming out based on my dissertation that is really around working with queer and trans folks in peer support work and how do we prevent burnout. And even though it talks about a specific population, I'm really talking about everybody, right? Like we are all tired. I don't know if you're tired, but a lot of us talk about like just being exhausted. We're working ourselves, we're using our identities as a way to like make connections with folks. And I think in community, we talk wonderfully about how do we make connections with other people around who we are. I don't think we talk about how that really burns us out and what do we need to do to take care of ourselves. So yeah, that's kind of how I landed here. And a lot of it, like I said, has really just been like, what can I write? What can I teach? What can I facilitate to leave this information behind so it can grow in other places where it needs to?
I had a recent conversation with Dr. Bruce Perry, and he said that the people are being othered, and when they're being othered, it like leads to so much trauma, and that the biggest space for healing is community. It seems
Mm,
like what you're doing.
yes, and even the othering can still feel collective, right? Like we can still be other together. We can still I can still recognize your other and say like, hey, maybe we need to move this chair out the way so it can fit your wheelchair. Right? Like maybe we need to like turn the speakers up if it's too low because you're having some issue around your hearing. Like I think there's all ways that we have an other, and I think that we can do that together. It just takes a little space and time and intentionality. So yeah, I totally agree. Like we can be, and I think that's the only way we're going to survive, right? Like we really have to stick together during these times.
So how does somebody not like do the othering game? I'm going to put it as a game because I feel like it
There's a way
doesn't
to do
make
it
any
wrong.
logical sense. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yes,
So
yes, yes, yes.
how do people in that same community not other? I mean, that's a, I feel like that I don't hear that a lot. Like people
Yes.
don't admit that, you know?
Because it happens. All right. Well, let me tell you about my study. So my study, my dissertation, like I said, was on peer support, trans folks, and I had a small group. There were only 5 people. Three of them identified as Black, two of them identified as white, all of them identified as trans masculine. So in me telling you that, we can make the assumption that they have some similar experience, right? Like, whether it's medical, whether it's, social, whether it's with family, there's going to be some level of a collective experience that people have. I think something that I found interesting was that not everybody, even in those groups of trans folks, there were still these divisions that we don't necessarily think about. We talk about race a lot, but we don't talk about like age of transition. We don't talk about experiences in healthcare. We don't talk about some of these other dynamics that people have that really make who we are different and how we form groups a little bit different too. I think some of that also like how do you manage an other in a community that already exists? I think it's also like being able to know when to step up and when to step back, like how much of my privilege or how much of my identity is taking up a certain level of space. I had a friend make a really good, tell a really good story, and she says, she was just like, as a Black, queer woman, I wanted to help this group of people like get together and like have a meeting. So I asked this group of trans folks, like, what can I do to help? And they were like, you can just make sandwiches. And she was just like, just make sandwiches. She was just like, I can come in, I can facilitate a training, I can, help get you a room, I can create your career, I can do all of these things in order to help build your group up. And the group was like, I just want you to make sandwiches. And so for her, she really had to sit back and say, like, I had all of these skills that I thought were going to be useful in a space when all I really had to do was listen to what the people wanted, and all the people wanted were sandwiches. So when we think about some of these protest or resistance or things that's happening in the world or just spaces where people feel like they're not getting what they're supposed to be getting, I think sometimes it's really helpful to sit back and say like, how much am I showing up in this space and what do the people really want? Like, I've literally sat in meetings and people said, we just want you to give $1. Right, we just want you to give $1 to our cause, and then people are like, oh, can I come in and do this or can I help people? We just need to listen more intently with what people want instead of listening out of just the sake of giving. And I feel like once we're able to manage that a little better and not always put ourselves first, I think we can get to where we need to be. But othering within communities happens a lot. And I think, like you said, it's not something we talk about because we just make the assumption that just because these folks look a certain way, then they're just going to have the same experiences. We're just going to plop down a certain level of resources and they'll be fine. And that's not always how that works.
Yeah. Oh, that's like such a heavy topic at the same time, especially listening. Nowadays, it's so easy. Like, we're not only listening to ourselves more than we listen to others, right? But we're kind of like, I don't want to use the word trauma too much because it's so heavy, but in a way, we're listening to our own traumatic past experiences, our own conditioning, and we're thinking that if I project whatever experience I had on another, that's going to be the same thing. And then that's like, I think that's the othering, actually. I don't,
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get validated in that othering because you hop on social media, right? Like your algorithm is just like, okay, you like this particular thing. This is a particular identity. This is something that you, so then you get shown that a lot. It feeds in and you internalize it. Like I think those are things that we also don't think about of just like my experience where I am and your experience where you are two totally different, right? Like, but somehow we found a way to like be together in this space, which I think is awesome, and the ways that we process our information or the way that we want to get affirmed are different. And I think that's something for us all to think about of just like, what are the ways that we're getting validated around our levels of trauma? And how much of that do we need to do in isolation? And how much do we need to do that in community and be witnessed in order to get other opinions and thoughts around what we are experiencing as well?
do we really need to be validated in those areas?
Oh, you're getting deep. I, you know, I'm all about liberation. So I feel like people should have the ability to be validated where they need to be, right? Like when people come to me, I'm also a therapist. So when people come to me, they want to be validated in their experience. Like they want to say, like, I had one client who has been seeing me for years, and she at the time she has a set of parents that she was naming as abusive. Not at the time, but before she was kind of like, are my parents abusive? And so we worked for years to get to a point where she was finally like, whew, I finally get to say this is an experience that I had with my caretakers that was not positive, that did not feel great. And now I have to move my life in that direction of living without parents, right? And I don't think she could have gotten on that path without us agreeing that the experience that she had in childhood was abusive. And what was also helpful, quote unquote, was that her siblings had different experiences. So she was confused at like, why am I feeling this way and they're not feeling that way? Oh, the experience that I had with my parents as an eldest girl was not the same as my siblings who were boys. And so I have to be able to process what my experience in my family is so I'm able to make the trajectory different. Now, do I feel like we need to do that for the rest of our lives? I think that's up to the person, right? I don't know if it's always healthy to do that, but I do feel like sometimes affirming where we are in that experience does help us move to a different direction so we can be able to define whatever healing is, right? I would just would hope that healing is not I'm always surrounding myself around this experience of change and not moving forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there a danger of invalidation? Like
Yeah, I
if you,
think we can. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, if you and I are talking and I share with you, oh, I have so many of these difficulties, these challenges, etc. And you tell me, Suchandra, that's all in your head. Tell me what's the danger of that? That's happening more and more and more in society. I'm seeing it here in Colorado. I've seen it in Maryland. Curious how you've seen it in your practice.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you're just going to find it somewhere else. Right? Like and I used to teach to some of my students and talk to them about sometimes the experiences that you're having with your clients, you may say something and it might not land immediately. right? It might not sit with them. But I've had, students, clients come to me and say, like, that thing that you said 2 years ago, that thing that you said 6 months ago, that thing that you said, last week really touched me. It changed me. It shifted kind of the thought that I had. I think that if we particularly are people of power, if we are folks who lead worship, if we are folks who are therapists, if we are folks who are doctors, healthcare workers, healers, if we have people come to us and say, like, I need to be seen, and we're like, no, you're gonna go find it somewhere, right? There's plenty of places to find it, and there are plenty of places with incorrect information. I would rather sit down and give you the space to process and give you the things that you need or help you get there, right? Or I'm not perfect. Help maybe send you somewhere else to where it is healthy for you to be able to have this level of validation. But I think that now there are enough channels to where if we deny people the things that they are asking for, they're going to find it somewhere else. I as I'm almost like, is this controlling? I'm like, while you're in my space, I would rather give you something that is healthy or at least can lead you to health, as opposed to you just, get on Instagram and hop it on a website and have it validate something that isn't necessarily real for you. So, good
And
question.
D and DEI has been invalidated or considered invalid in just this year, I think, right? After
Yeah, I mean, over time, I think even in the educational space, I think the hammer has fallen. Right, this year. I think that we've been having these whispers for quite a while in some of the spaces, whether we're talking about HIV, whether we're talking about grants, whether we're talking about education. Some of these, and even in some of, I would say in some of the states that have a little bit stricter laws around what does curriculum look like, these things have been changing. I think the unfortunate thing that I have seen is that these walls have fallen a little bit too soon, right? Like, I think that people have made voluntary decisions around taking away certain aspects that we didn't necessarily need to do at the time. And so either now we are coming up with new language and we're trying to scramble and try to keep those tenets in place so we can continue those traditions, or they're just going away, like the buildings, like the signs, like the statues, like those things are disappearing. And it's unfortunate. I would say it's unfortunate.
what do you think happened? Because I haven't heard anyone say it's been happening for a while. So I'm curious. What's your perception on that? How did this happen?
How did this happen? Powers that be. I think it's just been in the process for a long time. Let me also say I'm coming from a perspective of a Black queer person, right? In academia, in education, in social work. So I am speaking from the experience of not only seeing that it happened, but it happening to me at the same time. And so as I have witnessed in curriculum building, as I've witnessed being on DEI committees. There are just some conversations that I'm hearing that aren't long lasting. They are just not conversations that instill a level of implementation around those beliefs for them to last for a lifetime. And I think that's where I came up kind of with like what I call like a legacy framework, because if the things that we're talking about, diversity, equity, inclusion, aren't instilled in the next generation after us, is it real? Right?
Yeah.
Do you really want them to stay? Do you really want them to be implemented? So I would be, at an institution and I would be on the DEI committee and I would sit on it for a year and then it would shut down.
Mm.
Then a couple months later, another DEI committee would pop up. I would volunteer for that, then it would shut down. Right? It's just there was this cycling of it's here, we're doing something, and then it goes away. And so that's where for me, in seeing it happen this year, particularly as the, ED of accreditation, this was just a culmination of a process that's been happening for the past 5, 7 years of just there's these shutting downs, there's these quieting, there's these pushing things back in order to make room for just another interpretation of how we're giving information and history to people.
Yeah. Tell us about the framework. Can
Yeah.
you?
Oh, sure. I always forget to add this in. So I am a grief counselor and a death doula. So I help people cross on the other side. I used to work in a morgue here in DC many moons ago, which was one of the life-changing job, I will tell you, to sit with a person and talk to them about their deceased loved one and help them identify their bodies. And strangely, I have used those experiences in my work experiences, whether it's social work, whether it's strategic planning, whether it's curriculum building. And so when I talk about building legacy, it's really this idea of like, what are we leaving behind? And there's a similar concept, particularly in African tradition, where it talks about Sankofa, such as like that reaching back, pulling back that information and bringing it forward. My concept is we're not going to be here for the rest of our lives. Right? This is a very time limited adventure that we all have. And so, what am I going to leave behind for the next person to pick up? And that to me is the testament to you wanting a thought process, a framework, a theory to live on. Right. I believe in things so much, or I believe in the things that I'm writing, a podcast, a conversation, an Instagram post. I believe in it so much that I want to pass this on to somebody else so they can pick it up too. And I realized that that also needed to happen, particularly as being, I'm sure there's plenty now, right? But I think that being a Black queer person teaching human sexuality studies, talking in universities, talking about accreditation, there's not a lot of me. Right. I think I was the first Black queer, executive director of accreditation in that position. And so to be able to take that information that I have and pass it to a mentee, add that to a strategic plan, talk to a podcast and talk about kind of the adventures of education and DEI. To me, a legacy framework talks about when I am no longer here anymore, how are people going to be speaking about my work and how are people going to be carrying it on to the next level. And that's also to say, like, people can also pick my book up or my work or my article and say like, who is this? Right? Like this person doesn't know what they're talking about. Let's tear it up, let's critique it, but at least I left it behind for somebody to do that. If we don't leave these pebbles behind for people at all, let's think about what's going to happen to all of our aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion in 20 years. Like, I want your podcast to live on that long, right? Like, so you recording this and settling it into this institution of Zoom and and where you are, somebody's going to pick it up and say like, let's do a follow-up on that, right? Let's talk about where DEI is, from 20 years ago. I just think those are important to live on, and it's a testament of like, I believe in this. I
Yeah.
believe that I believe that this is real enough for it to last for a lifetime and for somebody to be able to critique it so they can pick it up and move it forward.
Okay, so you mentioned legacy, and my understanding is education, actually. Like,
Oh, okay.
did I understand that correctly?
Absolutely. I also, if you're not familiar, there's a whole book series that Bell Hooks has
Yeah.
on teaching, and
I
so
love
she
that
talks
book.
about like, yes, oh my gosh, like that's how I got instilled in being an educator, of just learning that not only curriculum building, education, teaching, it's not just about the words, it's about the feelings and emotions. It's about what we're leaving behind. And so, yeah, when I talk about legacy, it's not just about like what I am doing is facilitating. It's about like the educating. Paula Freire talks about like depositing, like teaching shouldn't be depositing the information into a person. It should be a mutual interaction that we both have with each other. I don't ever believe that I am, I would love to think I'm the smartest person in the room, but I don't ever believe that I have the only experience that needs to be heard, right? So sometimes it's about this exchange, and I leave with so much more sometimes than what I bring in. That is how all of our interactions should work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how here at Chung Huong Institute, what we want to do is continuously educate in a way that people think for themselves. That's real education, not how you say just put into people's brains, what? You know?
And what? Yeah, because then if I put it into your brain, does it die there? Do you think about it differently? Like there still should be a process of application. And I said that in my TED talk where, even when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it is a life skill, right? Like it's not just a work skill. It's not just I'm going to learn how to treat people within these four walls between 9 to 5. It should be I need to learn to be inclusive in all parts of my life because I don't know who I'm going to run into in the grocery store, in my Uber, all the way to the hospital, at the hospital. Like there should be a way that we can all incorporate this into our everyday lives. So yeah, absolutely. I think that we should all leave these pebbles behind for people to pick up.
I'm curious for those who are in the LGBTQ community or they are trans. We've had a lot of people who have come through and they have said they've been abandoned by their families,
Mm,
that their parents won't speak to them, that they had to make a choice to be themselves or be loved for someone they are not. And
yeah.
I'm curious if you have any advice for any of those people who are listening.
Oh, first of all, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is where the validation comes in. I would say, like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, that sucks because you're a person that is coming into your own. You're finding a level of validation. Like, you deserve to have people around you who love and care about you right where you are. And so, in that, I also say, who else can we help? You build family with? Is it a community person? Do we need to find you an online group? Do we need to find you a mentor? Who else can we find for you to be a possibility model for you so you don't feel alone? Because unfortunately, a lot of people feel this way. I think as time goes along with, all that's going on in the world, people are going to continue to feel this way and continue to feel isolated. So I think there's always a chance to sit and feel validated in those feelings of abandonment, but also who can we turn to for you to also make connections to other people so you don't feel alone? Because unfortunately, a lot of people have been here, but we can make those connections so you don't, that you do have a community that loves and care about you and gives you the affirmation that you need.
Always comes back to community. I'm seeing this pattern.
Okay.
Everyone I speak community, 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 which then goodness, like let us just continue establishing a big world community that's so loving, and accepting. And
Yeah, that's the way we're supposed to exist. Even and I know that even with like COVID, we're shifting and changing the way that we think about isolation and the use of the internet, because I know one of the things I had to be careful with was just like get off your computers, right? Like go outside, like go play, go next door, go, have a drink, go do what you need to do to interact with people. And I have to be mindful that not everybody can leave their home, right? Like not everybody, like the internet is the gateway to communities for some folks. So I think my encouragement is also like get out, and sometimes that getting out you might need to go visit somebody, right? You might need to go find our other disabled or differently able people to make sure that they are also okay as well. Like we all deserve to be in community in some way, shape, or form. The internet should enhance it. It shouldn't isolate us further.
yeah. How do you build this into your curriculums?
Yeah, I I'm a social worker. I'm
Okay,
a
well,
social
tell those of us who
worker.
aren't.
So the people who aren't social workers, so I say that in just because I'm always like, who else? Right? Who else needs to be included here? Who are we missing? We can't do this work alone. So whether I have built curriculum, whether it's been at University of Southern California, whether it's been at University of Maryland, whether it's been for organization, I'm always like, you all can't do this by yourself. Right? Like we don't hold all the information about health. We don't hold all the information about public health or social work or working with youth. So who else can we reach to get assistance? And I build those into my curriculum. Even sometimes the assignments that I make up, I require students to go out and find people who are within their field or go out and find organizations who are doing something similar. And I found really cool opportunities where students have written up things, talked to organizations, they've gotten jobs and internships. Like there has just been an expansion of just, I didn't know these people existed. I knew I wanted to do this mission, but I didn't know that that thing already existed. I was talking with somebody last week about sometimes it's hard because we silo ourselves in so many places because we have particular niche and interests. And I think that how to bring that back into curriculum is, again, just like, how are you writing in different experiences so your students are forced your students are strongly encouraged to be able to branch out of their mold and to look into different places, right? Yeah, I just make sure that if we are learning about how to be better people, educators in whatever fields that you're in or whatever fields that you're building curriculum around, I think sometimes that's really about who else can do the thing that I can't necessarily do. Bringing in guest speakers, right? Bringing in different books, talking about I do this one lesson on substance use, and I don't know if you're familiar with DMX as a rapper. So DMX is a rapper famous from like the early 2000s, and but also very loved him. And he was also very known to have a very serious drug, a substance use problem, and ended up dying from it, unfortunately. There's this one clip that I use on the internet where he is talking to Ayanna Van Zandt, who had a show. They did the show together. She brought him on the show and to intervene around his substance use. And long story short, he was just not with it. Right? He was just like, you want me to be clean? Why? I don't know why. And she was just like, because I want you to be a clean vessel for God. And he was just like, but I'm already a clean vessel for God. Now, you can argue that point all day. The argument that I wanted to make with my students, for one, in building curriculum, timely, right? A lot of my students knew who DMX is. This is something that's on TV, so a little bit of media literacy. But I also challenge them around what happens if you have a client that actually doesn't want to get clean?
Yeah.
What happens what if we're talking about body autonomy, right? If we're talking about people have the right to exist in their body and find liberation and to be who they are, what is so wrong with him not wanting to be clean yet? What happens if that's just not his goal? What do you do with this client? And so I don't think that it's, as educators, we should always teach students the right way to do things. I think sometimes we need to find the indifferent way to do things and work around that. I have had more experiences in my practice around, I don't really know what to do with this person who doesn't want to get clean, as opposed to, I'm working with this client and they get clean and they're clean for the rest of their life. That just doesn't happen, right? But
Yeah.
talking to people around this indifference and this uncomfortability, and maybe even a challenging of our own ideas and our religious practices and our belief systems, like those are more realistic opportunities for learning and for critical thinking, as opposed to just teaching the perfect thing that is supposed to happen. So I just think that's more challenging that way. So yeah, I love media literacy. I'm always showing a clip or something from a movie or a TV show just to get a level of buy-in, for one, but I think also it just makes us think about how we move through the world and how we want to give support to people in different ways.
Well, that just reminds me, there was a time when I was doing some work with a neuroscience clinic, and I was one of the researchers there. And one of the people, he was a youth, considerably youth. His mom brought him
Mhm.
in, and she wanted him to stop doing a certain substance. I don't remember the exact substance, so I don't want to name the wrong thing. He didn't want to get clean.
Mm.
She forced him. And the doctors at the time there, they abided by her will, not his will.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the result was after 3 weeks, he decided to overdose because he didn't
Wow.
want to he didn't want any of that. And he took his life.
Wow.
I remember after that experience thinking, this is really exactly why people need to think for themselves, right? Like get out of the box and, like how you're saying, don't force anyone
Mhm.
to learn or do whatever it is, because it's not our agenda.
No. And I always think like, and people, whether it's a kid or whether it's one of my clients, like I have time limited space with them and then they go home, right? Then they leave my presence. So I can give you as much light and support and affirmation as I can, but I can't always fight the influences that are going to happen afterwards. So the goal is I want you to be comfortable with the decisions that you are making, but I want to make sure that you realize how much liberation you have in the decision. So if your decision is I want to use after I leave here, let's talk about what that looks like, right? I'm a harm reductionist, so I'm always just like, let's have a conversation. Again, like death is my thing. So I'm just like, okay, what does that look like? Right? Like, let me sit with you in the uncomfortability so we know what the possibilities are. And I find that for my clients, they respond to that so much better because nobody wants to sit in the darkness with them.
Mm.
Nobody wants to sit and be uncomfortable. In this world now, like, yeah, nobody wants to, it's already uncomfortable, right? Like, I don't want you to come telling me that you don't want to be here anymore. Yikes, right? But I feel like those are the times that we need to sit with people, listen to them when they feel like it, because they might have some truth that we all need to be keyed into. So,
When I'm teaching at university, I always tell people, I say, before you respond or react, ask yourself the question, are my words an improvement upon silence?
ooh, ooh,
And only then you speak. Now, that
only
takes a lot of
then.
effort to remember,
Okay.
right?
That's not about you, right? Yes,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
100%
Because
agree.
otherwise, how you say, people, they're going to go home at the end of the day. They don't have you there.
Mm-mm. No.
Yeah.
And if they are relying on you afterwards, you're not giving them the tools, right? You're not giving them the tools because again, who knows what happens when I leave, this house, right? And then I'm not here for for forever. Like then my client is dependent on the wrong thing. I don't want them to feel like they're alone, but I do want them to feel like they have enough autonomy to make decisions for themselves. But yeah, that is why I start my clinical sessions, when I'm first meeting a client, we talk about termination, right? What does the end result look like? Because again, the goal is for you to get out of here, right? Like now, I do have clients that I've seen for years, but it's never this is where we're going to sit. It's we have a goal, right? So how can I get you to the goal? And I want you to believe that you can reach there whether I'm here or not, which is why I connect you to community, right? Which is why I connect you to other people.
So if we back up real quick with curriculum, when you're teaching a course and there are students, they have to take your course. And I'm using the word have to very intentionally. They don't want to be there. They're just like, all right, got to get it over with.
Hmm.
What do you do? Like, how do you inspire them? How do you work with that? Um,
Good question, because you do have those folks, especially when it's like social work and politics. It's something where it's just like, oh gosh. Um, I again, I'm an elder millennial, so I love a good TV show. We're gonna read a book. We're gonna watch a movie. I always like to connect it to what is happening in the world currently, so it does. I think some of that is about buy-in, right? Like if I can distance myself enough to just get the work done and I don't have to emotionally be invested, then people, to some extent, I respect that you are just here because you just need this credit and you need to go. And let's give you a little tidbit before you leave. One class that I remember teaching that it was my politics and social work class, and it was about trauma, and I showed two movies, or I showed clips from two movies. One was the documentary about Paris Hilton on YouTube, and it talked about her experience being a teen, a troubled teen who was taken from her home, and she went to a residential treatment facility and talked about her like really traumatic experience there. And so I showed that, and then people were like, "Whoa." And I said, let's talk about the experience of trauma. We went through, like, people were really into it because they were like, Paris Hilton. And I said, yes. Now let's look at this other clip. And so then I showed a clip from Khalif Browder, and people are not familiar with Khalif Browder. He was a black man who was caught at 16, a black boy who was caught at 16, stealing a book bag, quote unquote. He got accused. He ended up being in Rikers. They ended up locking him up for Rikers, not giving him a trial, not letting him out. And I think he stayed there for 3 years. Somebody can check me on that. But afterwards, he stayed in solitary confinement for a really long time and was having the similar traumatic experiences that Paris Hilton had. And unfortunately, he ended up completing suicide. And so I show these two movies, in class back to back, and I talk to them about like, let's talk about trauma. All right, like let's name stuff. And as they're naming stuff, they're like, oh shoot, we assumed that this person over here experienced trauma, but we didn't assume this person over here. Why did we do that? We can talk about race, we can talk about gender, we can talk about class privilege, right? So I think those are things that I use to reel people in, that I'm using you all's identity, I'm talking about you all's experiences, I'm using media that you all have access to. Plenty of people afterwards, they're like, I went back and watched the whole movie. Great. Gotcha. Right?
It
Gotcha.
worked.
It worked, right? It worked. Like yeah, you're gonna have. I had one person that was just like, yeah, we had a mini party and watched the whole Khalif Browder series because it was about politics, it was about Rikers Island, it was about bail. They had another class on like bail. So I just like to show the tentacles of what we're doing in class reaches you all across where you are. Even when I'm talking in maybe I'm talking about like youth and families and I bring up a chapter on LGBTQ folks, like not that's not everybody's population that they're going to work with, but at the end of the semester, there's at least one person that emails me and says, I have a trans client, like I have a queer client. Thank goodness I was in that class one day and learned about these terms and words and these methods because now I can work with them. Now this client can trust me. So I think that there's always going to be some level of disconnect in educational spaces, unfortunately, because we have a certain distance, especially with like, we're all online. So it's easy to just turn the computer, turn the camera off and like go do something else. But if I can make you laugh, if I can show you a clip, if I can show you something that relates to your own life, it just hooks people in, right? Like make it entertaining. We unfortunately need to be entertained. So make it entertaining to the limits of who you are as an educator. Not everybody is as silly as me. Right? So find your own silly or find your own serious or find your own sweet spot and work from there.
Is that the secret to an award-winning curriculum?
It is. Hey, bring yourself. Bring yourself. Because it's funny. I had somebody ask me in another conversation, they were like, well, how do you teach people how to do what you do? And I was just like, I was like, I can't teach them 43 years of me. Like I can't, there was a lot of things that went on that make me, this funny. And some of it's trauma, right? So I
Yeah.
can't teach you that, but I can make you comfortable about you being comfortable with yourself. I will also add in that what I find different about the curriculum that I develop. Again, I'm a social worker, so I really do think about the mental health and the self-care aspects of education. People can't learn when they're in distress.
Yeah.
You can't learn when you're thinking about what's happening in the street, what's going on TV, watching what's going on social media. It's just really difficult, especially if you are a person that looks like the people who are being persecuted, right? Like that just makes it infinitely harder. So I think for me, I start my classes off with or I start telling people like I teach them start your classes off with a check-in. As corny as it could be, you never know when people feel like a two and they need some support. I have plenty of classes that I didn't think check-ins were going to go anywhere. And my check-ins are on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? 10 is great and fantastic. One is an emergency. We need to call somebody. And there have been a few times where people have said, like, I'm a one. I'm having a really hard time. And us as a class have came together and found different resources or support to give that person. And at the end of the class, they're like, I feel like a four, or I forgot to eat. Y'all reminded me I needed to eat. I went to go get some water during class and I feel great. Like there have just been times where we've just created this level of community and integration that folks need to feel safe in an educational space. And I feel like that's missing. I
Yeah.
feel like people should care about one another differently. And I can't throwing information at you that just doesn't work. Not that I found. I found that if I show people that I care about them as people, they are more invested in the learning process and they are willing to push their learning and their limits around learning a little bit farther. Because if I create a safe space for you enough, we can talk about suicide. If I
Yeah.
make a space safe enough, we can talk about the process of death. We can talk about the trauma that's going on in the street. But if I just come in and just throw it to you in your face, you're going to make a decision to do this, right? To push back. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I want people to move closer into the experience of learning and not pushing themselves back.
How do you let the students know it's truly safe? A lot of the bigger universities, I've heard that they say if a student even brings up the topic of suicide, even the professor says to the student it's private, they have to report it and file a report. And I feel like that's so sad and such a break of trust, you know? Like that doesn't, I don't know. That's just my opinion. It doesn't really make sense to break the trust if there's no active suicidal ideation
I'm
or,
with you.
you know,
I'm with you. And some of that's fear. Some of that is incompetence, right? Like I think some of it is just like I'm not comfortable enough to sit with those I talked about this before. I'm not comfortable to sit with those uncomfortable feelings, so I'm actually going to avoid that and send you to the authorities, right? Like you need to take that somewhere else. And that's the wrong place to go. I want to keep that person in my sphere of care, whether you're an educator or a therapist. I want to keep you in my sphere of care as much as possible. Let's talk about why you're feeling that way. Let's talk about what your client said. Tell me more about that thought process. Now, if you feel like it is outside of your window of your scope of like practice, then the proper process is let me take you, right? Let me assist you. Let me not just send you and hope that you go there. Let me actually, in community, walk with you to the counseling center. Let's have a conversation to help you make this report. I think there's a way to do that, right? I think there's a way to draw a boundary. I'm not asking everybody to say, like, yeah, just talk about everything and you should be comfortable. I don't think that that's true either, because I think that we're human beings and that we all have things we don't want to talk about. But I do think it is a proper responsibility for us to know when people are coming to us with these issues that don't necessarily feel good and that we are out of sorts or that we don't have the skill set for. We do have an opportunity to move you to another place so you can get the support that you need. But that's unfortunate, and that sounds like a client experience, right? Like I've also heard clients come to me and say, "I'm not going to tell you certain things because you're going to go tell somebody else." Why? Because another social worker did that to me.
yeah.
Well, yeah, right. I can understand why that feels uncomfortable and why you don't want to say anything to me because you have a history of people not necessarily respecting your trust.
Yeah. Respecting trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's like, I think we need to have that on a poster.
Right. Just
And like,
respect it. Just I trust that what you're going through is real. Right. And I
yeah.
trust that I have as many skills as I can in order to help you. And when I don't, I have to trust myself to back away and find somebody to help you. Right. Like there's a process here, but we are just so quick to throw people away and then wonder why there's so many thrown away people. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and wonder why there's so much violence or chaos. Like I
Okay.
think if people just get or can be accepting, all of us want to
Mhm.
be happy. None of us want to suffer. So why do we have to make others suffer?
Why do we have to make others suffer? I have a hard time with that. I know that there's a philosophical answer to that somewhere. I know everybody, but I'm just like, we can all just chill and eat snacks. I'm a tourist also. So I'm just like, my go-to is always, why don't we just eat some snacks and rest and take a nap? Like that could be the thing that we could be doing, but instead we are invoking violence on one another. And until then, we're going to create curriculum and spaces safe enough for people to be able to process the things that they need to process and build community so we can support each other. But yeah, it's really confusing sometimes, even as a therapist.
Yeah. So hopefully the last question from my side here.
Okay.
What does it mean to be a curriculum architect? I've seen you use that
Mm,
word, and I'm like,
yes.
I want to be an architect.
You can.
Yeah.
A part of me wanted to be an architect because I cannot do math. So I was just like, oh, I can't build buildings, but I can build curriculum. And I feel like some of those pieces, like I said, are when I call myself an architect, I like to think about, again, what are the pieces that we need to draw in to make this whole building, this whole structure, this whole experience. And so even if we're talking about like racial justice, like how can we bring in pieces of other organizations to give support when we're thinking about mental health and families? Are we making sure that we're getting are we getting the best research, the evidence-based articles? Are we making sure that we're talking to people in community? How are we constructing a great document a PDF file, a class, a workshop, a facilitation group, a supervision group, a community space in order to pass on information to other people and to still bring them together. And you know, I feel like the base of my foundation again is like mental health and self-care. How are people making sure they get what they need so they can able to sprout and grow in the information that they're going to learn? I want people to be prepared mentally and also intellectually, but I want people to be prepared in their heart. I want them to make space for things that feel uncomfortable. And I also, you know, kind of want to push that. And it's not just people who look a certain way. Like, I think that we look at one population and say that you all need to do better, when I really think that we all need to do better.
Yeah.
Even as a person that identifies as a Black, queer, non-binary person, there are still things around ableism that I need to learn and work out. You know, when I'm thinking about like immigration, or when I'm thinking about like racial justice or education, there are just things that I need to do better around, because I do know that not everything that I learned was equitable, had diversity, or was inclusive. So I think that when we want to build curriculum, when we want to build safer spaces, we have to consider ourselves as whole people, but also like, who else are we drawing in for information? And is that information also reflective of the people who are receiving it, right? Making sure that we are including everybody and also thinking about the gaps where we also need to instill information as well.
Thank you, Shanéa. Shanéa, we have a ritual here where the previous podcast guest asks a question to the next one.
Oh, okay.
So your question is, what does happiness really mean?
Hmm. Thank you to the person who asked that. These days, I have a 7-year-old kiddo, and I absolutely love when they come up with their grubby little hands. They probably just ate like noodles or popcorn or something sticky, and they'll put their hands on the side of my face and they'll say, "Love you, Peanut." And I don't know where my child has started calling me Peanut. I don't know where that comes from, but it's just so, there's just so much innocence in just putting their hands on my face and me looking into their eyes. And they're just like, "You're the best thing in the world." Even if I had a really crappy day, or like reading the news, or like something else has happened, this little kid don't care about none of that. They just want to take their grubby, dirty fingers and put them on my face and tell me they love me. And then they're going to go off and watch Paw Patrol. You know, and they're going to ask for berries. You know, they're going to say like, "Can I have more popcorn, or can I have more grapes?" And that's all they care about. So to me, like, happiness is just rooting yourself in the basis of just being here. Right? Sometimes it's just about sitting in this space and like, things aren't great, but I'm here, and there's at least somebody else who doesn't know anything that's going on out there, and they can appreciate a good TV show and some noodles. You know, like, I think, long story short, like, there is this sort of like, there's happiness in ignorance, and I get that from my kid a lot, where, you know, let me come down out of my head a little bit and just enjoy Peppa Pig and some grapes. Like, that's useful. So hopefully that's a good answer.
That is the most sweetest innocent answer I think ever heard anyone say. Although we haven't asked that question formally, but anyone I've talked about happiness, I'm like, it's like very serious. And I'm like, where's the happiness and the happiness there? You
Give
just
it more. So
yeah,
yes, if you can ignore the smell of noodles and just look into the eyes of like the innocent child, yeah, then you're like, you know, life's all right. I'm here, right? I'm here to have this moment in this period of time. And I think that's what's happiness to me these days.
I love that. Thank you so much,
You're
Dr. Shanae
welcome.
Thomas. Today you have allowed me to pick your brain a bit. And you have inspired, I'm sure, not just me, but also everyone who's listening here on the various topics. I'm really excited for everyone to listen, and I hope that they are able to connect with you after, which I know I said I asked the last question and I just pushed another one. But I'm going to ask last promise. What's the way people can find you?
Sure, everywhere. You just type in Shanae Thomas, Shaneathomas. I'm on Instagram, so Dr. Shanae Thomas on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. But like I said, just you can find me. My email is drshaneapthomas@gmail.com. And I'm happy to connect. Again, we are now colleagues and in community. So feel free to reach out in any way that you need. And I'm happy to share this space. And this is a little challenging. Thank you very much for like the little quips and pushback. Like I like when interviewers like interview. Okay, I like when we get into it. So thank you very much. This was a fantastic experience. Like, thank you so much.